While China appears to support Tesla for the moment, could the communist country lash out at all things U.S. after President Biden signed a bill into law last week that not only provides foreign aid for Taiwan, but also forces Chinese-owned TikTok to divest within 12 months or face a ban? Retribution could already be in the works. In a press briefing today, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian threatened possible retaliation. And according to Reuters, Lin said, quote, if the U.S. clings obstinately to its course, China will take resolute and forceful steps to firmly defend its own security and development interests. Virginia Senator Mark Warner has been at the forefront of this battle to ban TikTok, which he calls a national security threat. The Senate Intelligence Committee chair joins us now first on Fox Business. Senator, thank you for being here. First, what do you make of that threat by China's foreign ministry?
Well, I'm not surprised. And let's again remember what happened last week. 80% of the House, 80% of the Senate agreed that we need to see a divestiture, not a ban of TikTok, a divestiture from a Chinese-controlled company to an American-controlled, Canadian, British, Brazilian, just someone that is not as much of an adversarial nation as China. And remember, China does not even allow the TikTok that our kids see to be offered in China itself. They have a much more sanitized version. China does not allow Google, does not allow Meta. They keep our companies out. And what was particularly, I think, ironic was that there were at least reports of Chinese officials themselves lobbying members of Congress not to put this divestiture in place. So I think we'll see some huffing and puffing from the Chinese, what they will do. And if this was a normal free enterprise entity, they would salute the fact that their company has become so valuable and it would be sold for a high price. But because this ability to both collect data, and remember, even on the Tesla piece beforehand, China is collecting data off of their Tesla users in China, but also the ability for TikTok to be used as a propaganda tool, particularly in a country like ours where we have enough differences amongst ourselves. We don't need the Chinese Communist Party trying to influence our elections by slightly shifting the algorithm for favorable stories towards their regime.
Senator, they never give American companies who were doing business in China the opportunity to get a fair fight in their courts. ByteDance says it is going to fight this and it will take it to our U.S. courts. I mean, the question is, why do we allow them the opportunity to even get exposure to our legal system when they never give anybody a fair shake when it comes to U.S. companies who feel they've been ripped off and their IP has been stolen in China?
Well, as you're right, I mean, $500 billion a year of IP stolen from American and foreign companies. But I don't want us to have a regime like China. I think, ByteDance, the Chinese-owned company that controls TikTok, will get a day in court. I think we've structured this law, and a lot of this was originally originated in the House in a way that'll stand up to legal scrutiny. I'm glad we've got a First Amendment. I'm glad we've got protections. But we also need to acknowledge what everyone from both law enforcement and the national security community has said. This is a national security risk. And the fact that China is, again, the Chinese officials themselves were lobbying against this effort, I think demonstrates how important this is to China, both in terms of data collection. And as I mentioned, with so many young people getting almost all their news from TikTok, I hate to say it, but the TikTok spread is actually bigger than Fox News and MSNBC combined. And the fact that that could be influenced by the Communist Party of China, that's not good for the United States.
So 170 million users. It's absolutely gigantic. Senator, when you talk about what's happening in China and the access the people, the Communist Party has to our data. I've asked you this question before. I'm kind of hoping for not a better answer, but a more meaty answer. The feeling is that when it passed with 80% of the House and 80% of the Senate, both sides of the aisle coming together, that they've seen something that worries them dramatically about the national security threat. Can you give our viewers any insight into what that is?
Liz, I can't get into things that are sources and methods about how we have further evidence of the ability to have this site manipulate. I will say this, there are independent researchers that look on TikTok and they say, let's just take the Israel-Gaza issue. On TikTok, it is 54-1 more pro-Palestinian posts than pro-Israel. Even if we accept the fact in America that amongst young people, which is mostly TikTok users, it might be 80-20 in favor of Palestinians over Israel. It's not 54-1. So that independent kind of data, or the fact that on comparing TikTok to Instagram, 125 times more demonstrations around Hong Kong democracy protests on Instagram than TikTok, those numbers, even independent of the Intel community data, those independent numbers, I think, are one of the reasons why we had such overwhelming majorities in both bodies.
There is belief that they are sowing divisiveness and trying to weaken us by dividing us on very obvious issues. I mean, how students can sit there and say, yay, Hamas, we are all Hamas. Those are terrorists who slaughtered babies, raped women. It's like, what happened? We suddenly have a whole generation who's forgotten October 7th. 1,200 Israeli civilians and Americans killed. So let me just ask about the American business people who may want to buy this arm, this U.S. arm of ByteDance's TikTok. Let's say ByteDance finally says, OK, fine. How, A, do you make sure that the Chinese are not putting in some type of technological or code backdoor that they can still spy on Americans? And how difficult will it be for any consortium of Americans to buy TikTok? And how much vetting will they have to go through Congress?
Well, there's two parts of that question.
Yes.
First, in terms of the technology piece, we're going to have to completely scrub the algorithm. You may need to even almost recreate part of that so that the upgrades, and this is the thing, is that, even if your data is safe today or the propaganda is safe today, all of these algorithms are updated on almost a daily basis. And if those upgrades come from China, we're always going to be vulnerable. That was one of the reasons why it took us too long to convince, and we finally have nation states about the vulnerabilities with Huawei, the Chinese telecom provider. And they're literally, countries are ripping that equipment out because of the vulnerability. If we move this to an American entity and they control the algorithm and the upgrades, I think we will be safe along with the data protections. How do we get that done? Well, basically about 40% of ByteDance is already controlled by American investors. So if they were simply willing to roll over that investment, and you have had interest from one of the guys, I think on Shark Tank, I can't remember his name, Kevin.
Kevin O'Leary. He's going to come on the show and talk about it.
Yeah, and Steve Mnuchin, frankly, who was President Trump's Treasury Secretary, he was one of the first people to raise concerns back in 2019 about this platform. So I would welcome those groups or others. I wish in many ways the American investors themselves might show the flag a little bit and say, why don't they put together an investor group? These are huge private equity firms. I think they ought to show a little faith in our system and maybe be part of this kind of transaction. But by giving a year, 6 months would have been really tough, even without the pressure from the Chinese government. Giving this the time frame for a year, if there's a way to get this done in a way that we can protect our security, trust me, I think the creativity ought to be continued, and this ought to be a divestiture, not a ban.
I do have to quickly ask you about the financial package that finally passed, bipartisan, for money for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. How quickly, because Ukraine is in desperate straits at the moment, how quickly can the weaponry it needs start going to them?
Well, I was hoping it had actually gotten there this weekend. I got an update. I think it will be, middle of this week, maybe towards the end. But we've got to get those particular, just the plain old bullets, the 155 millimeter shells, and the air defenses. Some of the other items will take a little bit longer. The Ukrainians have shown remarkable courage. I am so proud of the fact that our country finally stepped up and stood up. And I know for Speaker Johnson, this was tough, but I think it will go down as one of his most important moves as Speaker. And I commend him for it.
Senator Mark Warner, thank you very much.